What the hell is that? Submitted by Camohorse. This will likely be a long story, as there's a lot of background information needed for this story. For starters, I am a 17-year-old girl from Colorado. I'm white, and I don't have a lick of Native American blood in me. But I don't think that really matters for this. My dad's side of the family all have farms in Minnesota, built on land that was heavily populated by Native Americans well over a century ago. We know this because we found boxes on top of boxes of Native American artifacts, including tons of arrowheads and spears, ceremonial jewelry and pottery shards, tapping stones, and more. Every year during spring planting, the tractors bring up more. We have experienced paranormal happenings on our land, but I am only there so often, so I've only experienced a very small handful of things that I couldn't explain away. For the most part, while I am a Christian and a believer of the paranormal and supernatural, I like to find logical explanations to things. I'm often very curious, and it takes a lot to scare me. I've been through enough shit already to have lost most of my fear, but this year especially has been testing me on all levels. I had to fly back to Minnesota, which is where I really call home, the Wednesday after Memorial Day, because my grandpa passed away on Memorial Day morning. His death, honestly, shocked us all. He was stubborn and strong, and despite his disabilities and illnesses, he always pulled through when he got sick and was determined to return to the farm. But I guess he just couldn't take it anymore, and he passed away peacefully at home, surrounded by his wife and kids. He wanted all of his grandkids, including myself, to be at his funeral, so I flew in as soon as possible, leaving my life responsibilities in Colorado. My mom was nice enough to come with me, even though my parents divorced when I was a toddler. She just stayed at a hotel and out of our way for the most part, even though we invited her to Grandpa's wake and funeral. My mom wanted me to connect with my Minnesota family more than ever. So, the night of the day I flew in, my aunt offered to take me up to my Uncle A's place for something to do. My Uncle A just lives a quarter mile up the road from my grandma's farm. Of course, it's across the field from it. Grandma's farm is visible from Uncle A's house, and I could easily walk to and from the houses. When I got there, my uncle almost immediately gave me a .22 caliber rifle and a Mountain Dew soda, and complained to me about his growing blackbird problem. He said he'd give me $1 a bird, so I agreed to go out there and shoot. It was getting dark, and the sights on the rifle were off, so I didn't get anything at all except for a few leaves and sky. If the sights on the rifle were good, I would have made $5 that night, at least. My uncle had found his other .22 rifle with good sights, but by then it was too dark to differentiate the blackbirds from the robins, and it is illegal to shoot robins in the state of Minnesota. So to pass the time, my uncle set up a pyramid of soda and beer cans, and also balanced a few gallon caps on a gallon of laundry detergent for us to shoot at. My little cousins came out with their bows and BB guns, so my uncle and I would take turns showing the boys how to shoot their weapons, and fired our .22s as well. We were having a very good time, and I had almost forgotten the main reason why I was in Minnesota in the first place. My cousins had gone down to the basement walkout, where my aunt and uncle's wife were sitting. Meanwhile, my uncle and I continued shooting our .22s, when my uncle suddenly commanded me to stop shooting. He was tracking something with his finger. "What the fuck is that?" my uncle shouted under his breath. "What is what?" I asked, alarmed. I squinted to see what my uncle was tracking, and then I saw it. From our standpoint, we could see across many young fields over rolling hills. If you look to the left, you could see grandma's, and if you look to the right, you could see several more farms dotting the fields. If you looked straight ahead, you'd see the side of a large hill with a field on it, and just ahead of that hill was a small grove of trees that also lined our property. The creature my uncle was pointing at was running parallel to the horizon and would eventually run across that hillside, which was no more than a quarter-mile away from us. It was hauling ass, running as fast or faster than a racehorse. The creature was solid black, very large and slender, with a small head, extremely long and thin legs, and no visible tail. At first, we thought it was a deer, but it was too slender and black to be a deer. Then, I suggested it was a Great Dane, or perhaps a horse. But no one in our area has a black Great Dane, or any big black dog for that matter, nor does anyone have a black horse. And the way this creature was running, it didn't look like either of those. It was about the size of a horse, but it ran a bit like a deer with a spring in its step. It had a hunched back and legs that were long and skinny like twigs, and its head was pretty small. It looked like a greyhound, but much, much larger, and it looked a bit distorted and twisted too. I don't really know how to explain it. I just knew it was pretty fucked up. I could tell the front of it was larger than its back, like its ribcage jutted out a bit. And while its front legs were like long human arms, and its back legs were like a deer's, only a bit more meaty than that, and its hip bones seemed to jut out a bit like hips on a Holstein cow. It was galloping and gaining speed, like it was on the hunt. But we didn't see what it was hunting down. I didn't get nervous until it banked our way and charged into the thin line of trees separating our property from the neighbors. This line was 2 trees thick at the most, and the trees were oak trees, no older than 20 years. We should have been able to see the thing stop, especially since it was no more than 300 feet away when it ran into the trees, but we didn't see nor hear anything. Plus, even when it came close, other than its size, there was nothing very clear about it. It was just slender, long-legged, puny-headed, and it didn't have any visible tail. My uncle's wife suddenly called our attention, asking what the hell we were seeing, and said we were scaring my little cousins. My uncle described it just as I did, and I confirmed because she thought we were just bullshitting. My uncle and I stayed in our places, our rifles loaded and ready, and stared at those trees for a good 10 minutes, occasionally glancing at each other, and saw nothing exit nor heard anything move. It was a windless, quiet night, so we could hear almost everything, including the cows nearly a mile away. Needless to say, we were both pretty freaked out, and I spent some time on my phone that night looking up various things to see if I could come up with a rational explanation for what we saw. I found nothing, except for skinwalker stories and descriptions, which fit the creature we saw perfectly. I've heard of skinwalkers before, and many stories, but never really believed they existed. Even if they did, I thought they were only in the southwestern states, but I guess they can appear anywhere. So, what do you guys think? I'm open to possible explanations, similar experiences, and other ideas. I don't usually share paranormal stories, but what happened that Wednesday night will definitely stick with me. I'm pretty sure I encountered a skinwalker in the Adirondacks, New York. Submitted by Coldblooded9898. So every summer, I go up to a lake in upstate New York, near the Canadian border. My family has a house that is pretty much in the middle of nowhere. It's a 30 to 45 minute drive to the nearest convenience store. We have 3 neighbors on our side of the lake, but there aren't any kids, and it's mostly all retired or vacationing elderly people. They don't stay up past 10, and it's perfectly quiet when the sun goes down. So here's my story. I have zero explanation for this, and the most reasonable thing to assume is a skinwalker. At around 11:30 p.m., maybe midnight, my cousin and I go down to our dock on the water. We have to walk through a short path in the woods to get there, and the thick trees border directly on the shore. There's no beach. While looking out at the stars in the water, we hear a quiet, raspy grumbling. That's the best I can explain it. Out in the forest, pretty far away. We didn't really know what it was and wasn't bothered by it. About 2 minutes later, we hear the same voice say both of our names. This time, it was closer to our property. From our dock, we could see along the shoreline, and we're near a corner, so we can see pretty well along the coast on our left. We were looking for a flashlight in the trees and saw nothing. Maybe someone was out kayaking at night and said something to their friend, and we just heard them wrong. Sound travels across the water very easily, so it could have been someone talking from their house, although our neighbors are about 1/3 of a mile away. Our uncle couldn't have been pulling a prank on us because of how far away it was, and there wasn't any light. 5 minutes pass, and we've calmed down. While we were sitting there in silence, thinking about what just happened, we hear footsteps. Loud, leaf-crunching footsteps, about 10 feet to the left of our dock, right behind the tree line, so we couldn't see anything. These footsteps were either from a human, bear, or deer. My cousin whispered that we need to get inside, but I told him that it might be a bear, and I didn't want to get chased while running back inside. So we were sitting on the dock holding our breath as the footsteps continued, then stopped for a bit. All of a sudden, we hear the same voice that said our names. Hello. I have never been more scared in my life. The voice was speaking English, but it wasn't human. It had an almost robotic growl under the word. I heard another story, and the way the author put it was spot on. The voice from the creature sounded like those videos when cats and dogs speak like humans and can't pronounce the words right. Both of us shit our pants at this point and sprinted inside, not even trying to glance at what was in the trees. My uncle was sitting on the couch with our dog. We spent the next 30 minutes checking the whole property and the nearby forest. Didn't see or hear anything. What the hell could it have been? This happened a little more than a week ago, and the scariest part I wondered was, how did that guy know our names, and why was he on our property? Yesterday I was reminded of the skinwalker from some videos on YouTube. It fits almost perfectly with the story, but they aren't known for being in New York. I wish I saw what it was, to see if it had a human or deer form. But the trees were so thick and it was so dark, we couldn't see anything behind the trees. Anyways, talking about them is apparently bad luck, and encountering what I experienced ever again will be too soon. Skinwalker in the Night. Submitted by Anonymous. I live in upstate New York, more towards the city area. But during the fall, I like to go towards the countryside, where I stay with my grandparents for a few days out of the week, just about every week. I've been going there all my life and I've never had anything weird happen. Just to let you know, I'm very skeptical and I'm also an atheist. So it takes a lot to get me to even consider believing some crazy story about a weird creature or a ghost. Well, let's just say that maybe I might change my mind. It was a Friday night, and I was hanging out with my grandpa, sitting on the back porch. My grandfather's old school, so he likes to roll up joints. And while sitting there, rolling up a joint, we were sharing some pretty deep conversation. Me and my grandfather get along very well, and we're very close. One thing about him is he never lies. Well, not to me. Not that I've ever known. He's also straightforward and extremely blunt. So whenever he speaks or tells a story, 99% of the time, it is the truth. Well, he started telling me this story of an encounter he had when he was a young boy in the woods playing around with his friends, that he saw a creature that he said didn't look like anything that they'd ever seen before. To make a long story short, he said that this creature mimicked their parents, calling and beckoning for them to come over to it. Him and his buddies were freaked out, so they took off running. Somehow they made it out of there, and everything was okay. Well, no sooner did he finish this story, did we hear branches snapping to our left. About 40 yards away, there was a tree line where the yard ends. I squinted, and I tried to look, but I couldn't see anything. My grandfather said it was probably just a coyote, so we brushed it off. We went back to talking, and again, we heard the branch snap, but this time it was closer. And this time, it snapped more than once, like something was trying to creep and accidentally broke a branch. Then, without warning, we heard this extremely low, deep growl. It scared the crap out of me. I looked at my grandfather with wide eyes. Immediately, he threw his board that he was rolling his joint onto the floor, stuffed his joint in his pocket, grabbed me by the arm, and said, "Let's go. We need to get inside now." We did. We got inside faster than he could finish his sentence. Once inside, I asked him to tell me why the hasty retreat. I thought it was just a coyote. He looked at me, took a deep breath, and then said without hesitation, "I don't think that was a coyote." He then went to explain that those sounds sounded more like what he heard when he was a child playing in the woods with his friends. This, as you can imagine, freaked me out. And needless to say, I don't really spend that much time at my grandparents' anymore. And when I do, I make sure I go during the day. My grandfather then proceeded to tell me about the legend of the skinwalkers, and that this is what he thought it closely resembled. Let's just say that I don't think I ever want to experience anything like that again. Now, before I end another video, I just want to take a minute to say thank you to everyone who took the time to listen or view this video. As a reminder, hit the subscribe button if you appreciate the content that I'm bringing to you. Please make sure you tap the bell so that you'll get a notification every time I drop a video. And as always, my fine, fair folks, fare thee well.